I'm Katie Wells, host of the Maximized Minimalist podcast. I escaped the hamster wheel of modern-day motherhood, overwhelmed by clutter and buried under the mental load. Now I live in a home that feels calm, manageable, and made for real life. I have margin in my days, energy for who matters most, and time for slow mornings and silly dance parties in the kitchen with my family. With over 5 million listens, the show has helped women around the world turn their homes into their happy place. Around here, we simplify for more peace, more presence, and more joy. We choose grace over guilt and progress over perfection. And we believe your home should give back more than it takes. I'm here to help you do the same. Come along with me and my guests as we share the real stories, habits, and strategies that help you lighten the load from the inside out. Pull up a seat, friend, and let's do this together. Ready, set, simplify. When your child is grown, what do you hope they'll remember about how it felt to be around you? Dr. Cassidy, feel all the feels, is here today. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's amazing. And she is also the author of a new book called Mom Needs a Moment. Hello. Yes, I do. This is out and available now.
Yes.
We need a moment. And she asks so many thought-provoking questions in this book. I'm so excited to welcome her to the Maximized Minimalist today. Dr. Cassidy,
oh my
welcome.
gosh. Thank you so much for having me. Katie, I love your work. You know, I am a super fan. Loved having you on my podcast, Holding Space, when your book was coming out, and just so grateful to be in conversation with you around this idea of mom needing a moment and how margins and space, and you talk so much about space, right? But how margins and space are actually such a key component to the idea of being a cycle breaker and how we break cycles and how we work through our triggers and feel less reactive, be less reactive, and just feel more connected and present with our kids and build a legacy.
Oh my gosh, so much goodness here. I guess, kicking us off related to what you started with, margin and space in order to be a cycle breaker. Where does one begin? I know I've certainly, especially when I became a mom, I was like, I am not acting like the parent I thought I would be. I was like, and then I would read the books and I'd be like, okay, I need to say this. But like you said, the triggers, I was like, who is coming out of my body right now?
Oh my gosh. And absolutely. Yeah.
It's just, we all have those moments. And I know a lot of us who listen to this show and just a lot of people I tend to attract, like we're into self-development and optimization. And by no means is this a judgmental or shaming thing. And our kids don't need us to be perfect and we're not going to be perfect. But when it comes to those people, and this was me too, when we spot these things where we're like, I am so far left to where I need to be responding, and this is a pattern I'm noticing, where does one start creating the margin and space in order to break that cycle?
Such a good question. And it honestly just started, as oftentimes these things do, with my own experience, which is so relatable to yours. Yeah. I became a parent. My oldest is 14 now. So over 14 years ago. And I am somebody who had always been a perfectionist, a people pleaser, really striving for high achievement. And I was also a young therapist at the time, right? Was just getting, working on my hours to getting licensed. And I really went into motherhood feeling like, oh, I'm prepared, I've got this. And as it does, right? When you are, healing from, which for me was a, really intense traumatic birth. I went in with very rigid plans of how I wanted that birth to look, as one does, when they come in with these parts of themselves that really are just trying to keep, myself and those I love safe, my baby safe. But I came in with a lot of rigidity and need for control. And then it all went haywire and it was traumatic. And so, processing that, but then you're, quickly now in sleep deprivation. I ended up having postpartum anxiety. My partner, my husband, had postpartum depression. We didn't know that the non-birthing partner could have, struggles. And that ended up becoming my dissertation, my research, like down the line once we, got support and got healed. But when I reflect back on those early days, and I share, this is, one of the first stories I share in this book, I felt so much shame for how, like irritable I was, triggered and reactive I was, how ragey and grumpy I was, how the kind of intrusive, scary thoughts I was having, connected to me for that postpartum anxiety of just all the different things that could happen to her, things that could happen to me. I felt so vulnerable, but so overwhelmed and overstimulated. And all I wanted was space. I would have these like daydreams of like escaping to a hotel room, right? And then the shame spiral of like, what kind of mother has these thoughts of wanting to escape her child and her family that I like wanted for so long? And it took time because of the shame for me to really say what was happening, what was going on, where I was struggling. But eventually I opened up to someone, and that just became like a balm for these parts of me that were really struggling. And I went and got support and got some healing. And it was then at that point that I decided to go back and get my PhD, did a ton of research on like, okay, I thought I was prepared, but like my husband was struggling and like that was impacting me, and like my anxiety was impacting him. So I did a ton of research on, just the impact of mental health for both partners and then the whole system, right? And then I, got licensed and decided to specialize in supporting moms. And time after time, when moms were coming in to see me and they were expressing what it was that they were struggling with and what they wanted, this concept of like desperately wanting some space kept coming up. It was like, if I could just have space, then I feel like I could figure out like, I'm reading these parenting books and like how to actually like implement these scripts or whatever. If I could just get some space and like I get touched out, if I could just get some space, I would feel like myself again. And then I could come in and be the kind of parent that I always hoped I would be. And so I wrote this book for the parent, for the mom who finds themselves like reading all the parenting books, like, being like, yeah, I jive with this. Like this feels aligned. And then in the moment, they're like, what the heck? I can't access that script, or I say it doesn't feel authentic. It isn't landing. Nothing is changing. And they recognize that there are just like these more personal, nuanced triggers that they have, right? These cycles these legacies from, the generations before them, that are cycles that they find themselves continuing to kind of go into, because that's the more familiar pathway, right? The things that they wanted to change that are so hard to change. And then the parts of themselves that make it really hard to navigate this role as a parent, right? The perfectionist, the people pleaser, right? The one who, finds himself like instantly like resorting to like yelling and trying to like almost like make everything around them stop. That's who I wrote this for. This idea of margins in space, I've become obsessed with, right? My podcast is Holding Space. My Substack is A Little Space, Please. Like I recognize time and time again the importance of space between a trigger and response, right? Like space for mistakes, space for small steps, right? And small progressions. And, space for ourselves, space for our support systems to be able to step in and help us. And I know that in this day and age, it's so hard to get though, because in this digital era, in this intensive parenting era, it's so easy for everything to become optimized, for all of our margins to be filled with taking in more information. And so in this book, I'm like, you know what? Let's address this head on so that after this book, you actually can go back to the other parenting strategies that you've been, really feeling aligned with and actually have it work. That's the hope.
I love that. So it sounds like starting point, for anyone out there listening who might be like, I need to break some of these cycles, is creating space. We can do that through the means of decluttering. Just a little promo for the decluttering.
100%. 1,000,000,000%. Like, so often when people think about this idea of like, how do I start with creating margins in space? And again, there's so many different ways. It could literally just be the like beat, pause, like building that muscle of creating space between noticing that you got triggered and how your body signals to you like what's being triggered. You having done the work through this book of contextualizing where these triggers came from, like what's the history there, which I think makes it so much easier to have compassion for these parts of ourselves, but just creating that beat between trigger and our reaction and our response, and like toning that muscle, which is what we do in the book. But a lot of times, what people really desperately are begging for first is for their space, like the space around them, their environment, to feel less triggering, right? To feel less overstimulating, to feel more peaceful, which is why I love your work so much. And there's so much alignment, because when you came on my podcast and you talked about this idea of expected mess versus clutter, that was life-changing. And I've had so many clients come into session and share, hey, I listened to that episode you had with that clutter expert. What's her name? Like Katie Wells. Like, yes, she's amazing. And they're like, oh my gosh, expected mess. Like just the shift that does, right? Because a lot of times, absolutely, our space can become part of the trigger.
I love that. I read a quote years ago that stuck with me, and I think ties into what we're talking about here. And that is, our brains will almost always choose a familiar hell instead of choosing an unfamiliar heaven. And I know we can certainly, absolutely, we can inherit really positive things from our parents, our caregivers, the world around us. Obviously, we're kind of talking about the ones we want to break today. But I think too, and I talk about this in my work, again, the parallels is that it just comes down to how we are wired. And I used to, like your clients, feel so much judgment toward myself and guilt. I remember crying in bed one night, sobbing because I had yelled at the kids. It was like during COVID and I had them, it was just a stressful time. And I was like, Andrew's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I get yelled at the boys like 8,000 times today. And I'm just, I felt so horrible. And I was like, but what do I do? And actually what you said really hit the nail on the head, because I was like, I have to practice the pause. I have to. So I love the term and language around giving that space, because every time I was like, I would tighten my body. I don't know that that's the right physiological response. It was almost like it stopped the yell from coming out.
Right. No, 100%. I love this quote that you shared. And there's actually a full chapter in the book that explores this idea of our brain is wired in a moment of stress to take the most familiar path. That's what it will prioritize. And let's think about it for a second. Let's walk this back, right? We were all little ones. And actually, let's walk it back even more. Your parents or those adults, caretakers around you when you were a child, right? They were little ones. I think it's so cool sometimes and meaningful, powerful to imagine like your caretakers, your parents as the children of your grandparents, right? Like they were little ones too. And they were trying to, as we all do, survive in our world, in our little world, in our environments. And how attachment works is that a child is wired towards finding the most effective way to keep the adults around them that they rely on for everything, right? For safety, for food, for protection, for everything. We rely on them. So we have to find ways to keep them close, and to stay attached to them. And also when we look at our environment, if it feels chaotic at moments, right? Like our child will find a way that's in their control to not add to the chaos, right? So then that's where you learn things like people pleasing or shutting down our big feelings. Or sometimes it might look more like finding ways to get louder, right? In order to like be heard, right? Or we observe the people around us who don't have the skills or the tools to regulate their emotions. And then they become adults. They have a child. They now have their own sort of wiring for what to do when sadness shows up. right? When anger shows up, when things feel overwhelming, when things are really loud, right? And so we learn also, right, as children, what that's going to look like. And that gets wired unless there was an adult who came in at some point and was like, you know what? These are how things have been going lately, or this is maybe something you've noticed. And I want to change that. I want to repair that, right? Like, let me now walk you through like what these feelings might mean and like why I might show up in these ways and what I want to create space for you. Like, unless you had like an adult come in and repair, and it doesn't need to be a parent. Sometimes it's another adult in your life, right? A teacher, a mentor, a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, right? Maybe it was a therapist. But most often, most likely, especially for our generation who is really like learning about how breaking cycles and repair and the importance of repair and how to regulate our emotions alongside our kids for the first time, unless we had that, then we bring that wiring into our adulthood, right? The cool thing is that neuroplasticity is real. So we can rewire these pathways. And in the book, we talk about the different ways that we can create those little beats of noticing that you've been triggered. Like when you said that, like in that moment, you're like, like that's like catching yourself. Like I almost see that as like you getting triggered, your fight, flight response.
Yes.
Maybe most likely fight, right? Response, showing up in that moment, like seeing the situation as a threat, right? Responding as if there's a saber-toothed tiger about to attack you. And when really it's just your child not listening or throwing a tantrum, right? And you in that moment are about to go into fight mode. And instead it's like putting the brakes on. I hear that noise is like, like putting the brakes on, right? And there's some really cool ways that like even just putting the brakes on can help us even just recognize that we've been triggered. And then in the book, I walk you through the process that I walk all my clients through of getting to know your triggers, right? And creating and rebuilding that, toning that muscle of noticing, because you will get triggered again. Like perfect is we have a whole chapter in there about the imperfectly perfect parts that are like actually the parts that are giving you information about your situation. And you will get triggered. It's data, right? About you may be needing something in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And what's cool though is that little you who needed a parent to be regulated, to help them validate their feelings, to set boundaries, to help them move through a tough moment, that little kid in you is still there. And I think is actually a really cool resource to access in these moments once we create that pause and just access it and connect back with it.
And I think this is accurate, but correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Cassidy, in the sense that I think sometimes going into optimizing parenting, breaking cycles, fixing our triggers, it's like, okay, the end goal is to not be triggered anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like the reduction of trigger and the shift in my response. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to completely stop triggers? Is that the end goal for you with you work with your clients, or is it like reduction and how we respond to it? Like that's what I face.
Such a good question.
Am I where I need to be?
Such a good question. Okay. The goal, and I think it's a really cool place to land. It's an incredibly meaningful place to land and such an incredible legacy to pass on, is to actually have a new relationship with the parts of us that bring forward and present our triggers, right? And so there's a way in which that they present these parts of us, right? That present the triggers, like, hey, FYI, there's something happening here that's bringing up something. The way in which that these parts of us show us that there's something, that this data, this information is happening about our situation can look different, right? Like it doesn't have to be so loud, so aggressive. It doesn't need to jump in the driver's seat. It doesn't have to be so fast, right? The way in which these parts of us show us, hey, something here is bringing something up can be different. And the way that we respond to those parts of us can look different, right? But ultimately, I love these parts of myself, actually. These parts of myself are really, really important. If we picture like I'm in the car and these parts of me that get really triggered, right? My like anxious part, my angry part, right? My overstimulated or over sensory overload part, my jealous part, my comparison part, all these parts of me, if we imagine them like in the back seat of the car, I want them in the car. I know that it feels at moments, especially when they've been taken over and they're in the driver's seat, you want to like, yeet them out of the car, but ultimately I want them here because my anxious part, it can signal to me like, hey, my kids, I have a 14-year-old, like her like body language is like a little different today. Like let's actually, and then what I can take with that data is like, okay, let's check in, let's tread lightly, right? Like, or, gosh, my anxious part is the part that like when I'm in the car is like, hey, put your seatbelt on, and I don't want that part necessarily to give me a scary, intrusive thought of all the horrible things that could happen and like keep me from driving, right? But I want these parts in there, right? Like even comparison can be, especially with social media, can be such a trigger. But ultimately, we're all wired for comparison. It's there to kind of show us like, hey, this new thing you're doing, this like new stage of parenting, like let's go see what others are doing because this is new, right? I don't need that to jump in the driver's seat and make me feel shame or like I'm just never going to be enough. Or like, it can be helpful to be like, what are others doing? I might actually, and then maybe it's like maybe someone else's, I'm seeing someone who's said that they are reading this book or going to therapy, or like they found this strategy helpful. I want to have a relationship with that part of me where I could be like, oh, okay, interesting. I wonder if that might be inspiring to me without feeling like it then has to jump in the driver's seat. And now I need to be perfectly aligned with this, right? Or feel ashamed if I don't line up.
I'm reminded of, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think it's called Inside Out. Is that the Pixar movie?
Yes.
Right. The emotions, the feelings. Yes.
There's a chapter in the book where we called All the Feelings, where we talk through Inside Out, and actually like the therapist that helped along the way, right? And that's really, really what it is about, is developing a new relationship, right? Sadness isn't all bad, right? Like we need sadness in order. Joy discovers that sadness helps connect her to those around her, right? Anxiety is just there to like think of all the possible things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
But if it jumps in the driver's seat, we see what can happen with Riley and Inside Out.
It's interesting. So much of what I originally thought I needed when it came to breaking cycles or optimizing parenting or learning to connect with my kid, I thought was all about the super tangible, practical how-tos. And those are helpful. And kind of just the two-way street of me and my kiddo. But so much of it continues to point back to like myself. Just like you said, connecting with those inner parts of us that we don't like, that frustrate us, that we wish weren't there. But like you said, they're there for a reason. We all have them. And, there are ways we can meet ourselves in those feelings with compassion, with pause, with permission, with love, with acknowledgement, with like, I remember telling myself in a therapy session, like, it very much was like, you were scared in that moment and you're still, that little girl is still inside you. And no wonder you're acting or you're struggling in this way. And just, I literally told myself, little Katie, like, you are okay. You're safe. And, related to this book launch, you're at a massive book launch. There is such exposure and vulnerability that comes from writing a book. And that was my worst nightmare. Because as a child, I learned it was not safe to be seen. So starting this podcast, writing a book, it feels scary because what's that mean? It's exposure to people who will not only disagree, but hate me. I don't want to be hated. Do you? It's like, this is the stuff as parents. And how did that tie into my parenting in so many ways? It's not even about a granular book launch, So it's fascinating.
This whole process has been so healing for me in so many ways, but also brought forward so many of my little parts, right? Like, well, one piece was I do talk about some of my own stories, right? And childhood experiences and cycles that I discovered that were triggering me and showing up for me that I wanted to break. And, having my parents read it was a big thing.
Yes.
Also, I remember after I got the book deal and I'm staring at a blank screen and getting ready to start writing again and just feeling so overwhelmed with the little part of me that was like, this is only worth it if it's the best book, if it's a bestseller, if it lands on some sort of bestseller list, because that part of me is how I felt safe growing up for a lot of different reasons. It's the part of me that felt like I needed to be a straight A mom, right? When I first became a mom, that made motherhood really, really difficult because turns out that's not actually impossible, and showed up for me with the book too. And it's a moment I'll never forget of staring at that screen and having this part of me come forward and be like, it's not going to be worth it. It's not going to be worthy or enough if it isn't like this bestseller, and that pressure. And then to be able to access also this myself, a voice that kind of was able to come in and to be like, oh my gosh, it is already enough. It does not need to be a bestseller for it to be worth it, because it is already, even just the process of writing the proposal, what that brought forward for me, that was already worth it. If it touches one person's life, it is worth it. It is enough, right? Like this feels like a soul purpose to be on, like SOUL, like my soul, like purpose to be writing this book. And I think that ultimately what anxiety is so scared of is death. When you really push it, it's like mortality and it's like bad things happening and death. Anxiety wants to protect us and those we love by like making sure that we belong, we fit in. Cause like, our ancestors needed to be a part of a group in order to survive, right? Like, and what's so hard for anxiety is that we are mortal. We are fragile, right? Life is fragile. And so to have to face that while carrying that job, that's a lot for anxiety to have to face, right?
Yeah.
And what I think is so amazing about this idea of legacy, breaking cycles and legacy, is that when we do that work, I do believe that there's a part of anxiety that this part of us, anxiety, gets to settle in a little bit and be like, wow, there is something that lives beyond our mortal being in our mortal life. And if we can do this work, there's something about anxiety that settles in a little bit. And I know for me, this book feels like a part of my legacy. And when I was able to lean into that, my anxiety was like, oh, that's bigger than us. That's bigger than some bestseller list, right? That's bigger than some like numbers. That's deeply value aligned legacy thing we're doing here. And I believe that raising children is that too. And that's, we end with the book wraps up. The last few chapters are about building legacy and reclaiming motherhood in these ways and leaving something for our kids that I think lives beyond us, right? And ultimately, the point being our kids looking back and being like how it felt to be around us, what they saw us do, what they learned from us. And I also hope that part of that legacy is that my kids will be in therapy one day working through the things that I didn't do perfectly, and that could be part of my legacy too.
That's right. The openness and willingness to open up and share, to pass that down to our kids, to be able to feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm not okay. That's a huge deal. And I think it's interesting. I used to really think, even before kids and even, early motherhood, I'd hear the word legacy and I'd think maybe like, it felt a bit elusive, but I'd be like, maybe financial legacy or like something more tangible.
Generational wealth, right? And I think that this is another version of generational wealth that I think is really
way better,
really important.
Yes, way more impactful. And I think we don't always understand or consider maybe the nuance of how acknowledging, healing, getting more comfortable with all the parts of us in turn really does impart a legacy on our kids through all the means of which you talked about. And I think that's a really great thing for all of us to walk away from, and being like, I'm not leaving my kids tons of money. So it's like, so what happens at the end, but so much. And it doesn't happen in one like big grand gesture. It's the day in, the day out. It's the school pickups. It's the, I did have a trigger. Now I have to repair. And I love how you mentioned that, because that is one thing I had to learn. It did not come naturally to me. And I know I'm not alone in that. It's like when I mess up, I'm the first to go to both my husband and my kids when the timing's right and say, listen, I messed up. I didn't mean to yell. I was overstimulated.
Yeah.
And next time that happens, I'm going to step outside. I'm going to say, listen, dude, I need a walk. And give me 2 minutes.
Take
I'll
a beat.
come back
You're going
to
to take
it.
a margin.
I'm going to take a beat. I'm going to take a pause, a margin. I'm going to create space, holding
You're going to say,
space.
Mom, you're going to you're going to see that mom needs a moment or a little space, please. Like literally all of my titles of all my things you can say.
And it's been years now. Now my oldest is 11, but I'll never forget one day, he must have been 7 or 8. And he had seen me do the kind of like tighten my body, take a deep breath, pause, gather my composure. And I've seen him do that still to this day when his little brother's antagonizing him. I need space.
Oh my
I need
gosh.
a moment. Please stop.
It's so cool to see.
Big. Yeah.
It's so cool to see when they do this, right? My oldest is 14. And again, she was my first. She got the most unhealed version of me in her early years. I walked back at some of like our home videos and I cringe at just the way I talk to her and I'm just trying to micromanage like everything, especially when we were like around other people. And the other day we were like, having a meal with some family. And I went to like cut a piece of cake and I dropped the cake and it was a mess. And I had like this like tension moment because, we're around a bunch of people and my daughter, she's sitting right there and she immediately goes, oh, mom, you're okay. It's okay. And I looked at her and I was like, girlfriend, thank you. Recently she's been going through some tough stuff. She's dating and socially and stuff. And she told me, like, she texted me and she was like, hey, Mom, like, when you pick me up, like, there's stuff I want to talk about. And I was just like, girl, like, and we talked about some really hard stuff that I would have never talked to my parents about. And they love me so much. It was their own stuff, their own anxieties that made me feel like I can't share certain things with them or I can't call them at certain moments. And, it's pretty cool to see, like, I did a ton of repair work, like I have a 5-year-old and when I'm parenting her, I'll turn to my 14-year-old and I'll be like, when you were this age, I didn't respond these ways. And you might not remember those moments, but maybe your body remembers these moments, right? Like it's never too late to repair and to then see the benefits of that repair work. Because I was like, in that moment, like for her to offer that to me, I was like, maybe there's a part of her body that's also learned that in hard moments, you can and you should expect to rely on others for support. You can talk about these things. You don't need to be alone in those feelings. You don't have to respond in a big way, right? Like you can offer sort of like a slowing down, a reminder of it's okay. This just happened this past Sunday. And I looked at her and I was like, girl, you're going to be a great parent one day. Like that was exactly like I was so quickly starting to feel like so bad that I just dropped this cake. And you immediately were like, it's okay. You're okay.
Isn't that what we all need to hear at the end of the day?
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. It's okay to mess up. And it is. It's okay, Mom. It's okay, Dad. It's okay. Like to have your child tell you that. What a beautiful moment.
Yeah. And like, it really truly didn't come from a place of her being like, oh, wait, I need to like make this moment easier. It was just this like, oh, you're good, And I was like, yeah, I am. Thanks. Now I can clean it up, and So anyway, it's never too late. And it's really, really, really meaningful to see it in action. And also for the parents who are like deeply in it in the early years, you're playing the long game, right? Your kids are not going to give you that immediate feedback of like, can I talk to you about this hard thing? Like, let me call you in this hard moment, right? Like, let me show you how regulated I can be in these situations. Like, nope, they will not. That comes with time. We're playing the long game here, but it's worth it.
Oh, so much gold here. So your new book, and congrats, you got your new book, baby, out. Available now. It's called Mom Needs a Moment, How to Stop Your Action Before It Starts and Become a Calmer, Happier, and More Connected Parent. Sign me up for all of those. So all my listeners, if anything, Dr. Cassidy said today resonated, you can get that book anywhere you find books. And we always end the show, Dr. Cassidy, with 2 signature questions here on the Maximize Minimalist. And the first one is, if you could magically declutter one thing from your life forever, no effort required, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. It would be, I'm staring at it right now. It would be
The screen?
it would be
Me? Oh no.
not you. It would probably be screens, like all the screens with all the tabs and all the pings that are constantly telling us that we need more of something, that we're not enough, that everyone else is doing all the cool things. Yeah, I wish that I could. And I just feel like, we're going to continue to have the screens and this in front of us, right? And so finding a way to have a new relationship with it feels really important, so we can help our kids with that. And we talk about that in the book too, right? Because that seems to be taking up all the margins in space, is all the pings of all the digital social media, emails, AI. It's going to be a lot. So we talk through that too.
I love it. Take me back to the 90s. Okay, second one.
Gosh.
What's one item in your home you would never let go of?
Oh my goodness. It's the little things that have been given to me by those who have passed, that whenever I come across it, or recently it's a little like gem clip that was from my grandmother, and my daughter recently found, and she had put it in her hair, and she showed up and she's like, "Mom, isn't this so beautiful?" And I was like, "It really is." And then I got to tell her the story of it, and I just got to feel my grandmother in that moment, just like beaming at this thing. So yeah, it's those little things.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. I love that. I could feel that moment. So thank you for sharing those with us.
Yeah,
Dr. Cassidy, any parting words to the listener out there who's ready to do this work and probably going to go grab your book? What do you want to leave them with?
You know what? If there was any moment today where you were just like, I want to push everyone away from me and I want to escape to the bathroom. Hi. I know. I feel you. I am you. I've been there. And I think that my book will meet you right there, because we start off with me being on my porcelain throne, like just being like trying to escape. But also I was hiding, right? And I wasn't talking to anyone about what I was feeling. And so if that's you, I wrote this book for you. And I also am a licensed therapist. I see clients. I have a group practice. So we have therapists licensed in California and New York. If you're based in California, I'd love to work with you, one-on-one. We do couples therapy too. And you can learn more about my practice at drcassidymft.com. And then on there, you'll also find the book page as well. And I've got the podcast holding space with, incredible guests such as you, Katie. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.